Fantastic. This way we leave it recorded for the future. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining this presentation about assessment in the MYP today. Let us please first introduce ourselves. You will probably know us in any case. I am Ivan Martinez, the head of the school and acting this year as the MYP coordinator. As you probably know, for each one of the programs within the IB, we must have a coordinator, a person to go from families, students, teachers. This is me this year, and I have here with me Mr. Jorge de la Torre. He is our MYP Science and Design teacher, and starting this year, he is acting as the MYP Coordinator Deputy. So you have down there our email addresses in case you have any concerns, any doubts. Of course, always the first point of contact is your children homeroom teacher or your child homeroom teacher, but you can also ask us any doubts you may have. As we cannot see you, there will be a final round for Q&A and any doubts you may have, but don't hesitate to unmute yourselves and stop us and ask any questions. We're going to try to make it simple, and hopefully this workshop will help you understand how do we tackle assessment. As a brief introduction to the IB Middle Years program, for those of you who are new to school this year, and in case you missed the initial meeting about the MYP we had at the beginning of the year, this is a summary the IB produces and summarizes the IB and specifically the MYP program philosophy, and also the main elements within the MYP. So as you see there at the core of this, you can see that is the student and the IB learner profile with its 10 attributes. You can ask your children about the IB attributes. Probably they will be able to share with you many ideas about the attributes they see daily at school. And as you know, many of your children probably have arrived home after one of our monthly assemblies with one certificate, one diploma celebrating one of the IB learner profiles they show at school every day. If we go further, you start seeing the rest of the components of the middle years program, finalizing with the 8 subject groups that we have in the MYP: language and literature, individuals and societies, math, design, arts, science, physical and health education, and language acquisition. But in any case, this workshop or this session is specifically about assessment. So if you have any doubts about this, we tackled in our first meeting, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Today, we're going to focus on assessment. We will mention that we do have an assessment policy and where to find it, the main difference between formative and summative tasks, what are the different criteria for the different subjects within the MYP and the descriptors, how do we mark. We will go through an activity so that you understand how do we mark in the MYP and how to follow students' progress. Very well. So this said, at every IB school, there are many policies, and probably you're familiar with the policies at school. You can find them, by the way, in the school's website, www.sek.sa. About school, there's a specific button there you can click, and you will be able to download all of the policies. However, I have to say that we invite families to revise the policies with us, and we will most likely have a workshop to revise policies early in January with you this year. So please take note of that. You're always an important part of the school community, and we would like to listen to your feedback and ideas about every single one of the policies. Now, you must know that we have an assessment policy, again, available online. And to summarize, what is our approach as a school to assessment is that we see assessment as an opportunity for teachers to give feedback to students, to give them the tools and some comments and guidelines on how to improve, how to grow as a student, how to develop the IB and the skills that they need to develop further as students, and how to improve the specific skills for each subject. So this is how we see assessment, as an opportunity for student growth. And it is very important, and we will see that later, that families are also involved in this process. So we always invite families to, if you have the chance, at least once a week, to sit with your child or your children, if you have more than one in the MYP, and go through their assignments on ManageBack, but most importantly, not only the assignments or tasks, but also the feedback teachers are providing, because you can look at it together, and we're quite sure that you will be able to help your children also understand about next steps and what is expected from them. This, as you probably know, we have two main types of assessment. If we had to divide them in between formative assessment and summative assessment, or formative and summative tasks. Here, who will be able to also guide you better would be your children. So if they are with you now, that's fantastic. I would very much like to have students also. We would very much like to have students also joining the session, even though they know how we assess. But it'd be fantastic to have them also for the activity that we have prepared for you. So that you get an idea, we usually have either one or two big summative tasks at the end of each unit. As you know, our teaching and learning is divided in 4 to 6 units, depending on the subject throughout the year. And sorry, at the end of each unit, we have 1, 2 big summative tasks. What we do as teachers throughout the unit is we prepare our students to do well, to perform well with this summative task. And we do that through formative assessment. And formative assessment may take many different forms. It could be a class discussion. It could be a simple check with the students and feedback. Are you getting this or not? Exercises and activities. Some of the homework going home is practice with your math. Do science activities on science reads. Draft an essay for English, research for individuals and societies, practice your writing with Arabic or Spanish, or your understanding of words. All of these are formative tasks that are aimed to help our students perform better in the final summative task. This way, if we see that a student is struggling with something, we can help them better. So it's very important that all our students, and you, if you can help with that, please, you read our teachers' feedback, and the students are able to act upon it. So many times a sample for a formative assessment would be, please draft an essay for an essay that they're going to write later, either in class or at home. But they are given the option to draft a task, an essay or a physical education task. They can draft it and submit it to the teacher. Sometimes students will say, bueno, but formative tasks do not count for the final grade. To some extent, that's right. But if you don't work on your formative tasks, you will never be ready to perform well in the summative task, which are the tasks that count for the final grade, that will go soon on the report cards at the end of the term. That's why it's important that also you at home can help us to deliver this message. Formative assessments, they are graded, students get feedback, and it is very important for them to read it and work on these tasks because this will help them perform better later. Any question with this, with formative and summative tasks? We'll keep on going then. Very well. Now that we've talked about summative and formative tasks and the approach that we have for assessment, that's the approach that the IB has as well. It's just an opportunity to get feedback and improve. You must know how it works in the MYP because it's very different from what you're used in grade 6 coming from the PYP and maybe from other schools. As you see there, the right side of the screen, there are 8 subject groups, the ones we mentioned earlier, and for each subject group, there are 4 different criteria. These criteria are based on the skills we want our students to develop and to master in each one of the subjects. As you can see as well, of course, these are different depending on the subject. So when it comes to language and literature, we want our students to be able to read a text and analyze it. We want our students to be able, when they are given the task of writing an essay or a text, they need to organize their ideas. Then they need to produce text in a specific way, and they use language. So as you see, for language and literature in red color, these are the 4 criteria that we assess. For each subject is different. You don't expect a student to show the same skills in a science class that the ones they show in language and literature. Of course, you expect them to use these skills in different subjects, but for the sciences, if you want to look at it in yellow in the image, the 4 criteria are knowing and understanding, and then it comes the component for a lab report. For a lab report, we expect our students to be able to design experiments, taking in consideration different topics, then performing the experiment, and criterion C would assess the ability of our students to analyze the outcome of this experiment. Okay, we will see that with the example later. And later, for criterion D for science is, for instance, reflecting on the impacts of science, which has an important component when it comes to thinking critically and writing. But as you see, the skills we expect our students to develop in the science class are not exactly the same as we expect them to develop in the language and literature class, and this applies to every subject. Okay, you have the different criteria for the different subject groups there to your right. Here, if you look at your the left side of your screen, you will see criterion A for individuals and societies. Criterion A for individuals and societies is knowing and understanding. And what students should be able to do, as you can read there, is use a wide range of terminology in context and demonstrate knowledge and understanding of subject-specific content. This is just an example, but we wanted you to see that for each one of the different criteria, there are different levels of achievement. So a student may be on a 0 if the student is not able to reach any of the standards, but later you have a band that's 1, 2, another band 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. So all of our teachers and students, and you as well, if you access to ManageBack, you have access to see what are the different criteria and descriptors and levels of achievement that we want our students to reach for a specific task. Okay, so this is what we at school and teachers use to assess our students' work. This is very important, and this is why we are going to use in a minute a task for you to understand how it works. I'll give you first an example. We are not going to work on this. We usually do use this as a warm-up activity. We're not going to have time if we do this. But instead of drawing a tree, what I am going to do is to draw this tree mentally. Think about a tree that you would draw on a piece of paper. You have all of the tools that you need. You have color pencils, you have a ruler if you want, but please design in your mind the tree you would draw if you were here physically at school, or if you had a piece of paper with you, what kind of tree you would draw. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think of a tree. Very well. Now, if I ask you to draw a tree, any tree, without any specific clarification, you probably have thought of many different things. This is just an example, but imagine that now I had to assess, and you can do that if you want mentally as well, your work, the tree you just had in mind, had envisioned. I would give 1 point if the tree has a brown trunk. I don't know how many of you thought of that. Another point if the tree has a green treetop, not yellow, not orange, but green. A tree with roots would get another point. A tree with red fruits would get another point. And if you finalize that tree with a bird's nest on it, that would get another point. If I don't give you any specific clarification in advance, I'm quite sure you've come up with many different ideas of trees and different colors and different sizes. But if, since the very beginning, I ask you, please make a brown trunk, green treetop, then you would know how to gain points or what is expected from you, okay? So what we're going to do now is, this was a very simple example. We have prepared, Mr. Jorge and myself have prepared a task for you. We had it printed here to share with you physically, but what I'm going to do is, while Mr. Jorge explains the activity, on the chat of the meeting, I am going to upload documents.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad we're all here to discuss assessment. We all do believe it's a very important aspect of the MYP, and we're gonna walk you guys through a small example of what we're doing with our students, especially in the subject of integrated sciences in grade 6. This is an example of a summative task. As Mr. Ivan was explaining, the summative task is a culmination of the learning within a unit. So we need to bear in mind that before this summative task, the students have engaged in a series of formative tasks that have hopefully helped them reach their standards, both conceptually and competence-wise, to be ready to face this summative. As you will see in a second, the summative task that we're going to be engaging with today is a lab report. And students have access as well as families to the task descriptions on ManageBack, which we do encourage you guys to take a close look with your students as well. As here, we can find some of the keys to success in criteria-based assessment. Why do we say this? One of the most frequent mistakes or lessons that need to be learned when a student is entering the MYP is understanding the difference from what does the teacher want me to do type of approach towards how does the teacher want me to do it. And I think getting that mental shift is crucial in allowing our students to comprehend the level of assessment that goes on behind their learning. Why do we say this? Before, probably in the PYP or many other school systems, it's very much so about what does the student need to know? How do they need to demonstrate the knowledge they've acquired or the skills throughout the unit? Great. However, when we reach to the MYP level, it's no longer about what we have to do, right? It's much so about how we do it. And this is where the criteria descriptors come into play. What happens is most of the students, they just look at what you guys are glancing through right now, which is the task description. By the way, as you can see, it is not an easy task, right? We understand the difficult and challenging nature of our assignments, but they aren't in this nature on purpose, right? We want to train our students in every subject to be competitive scientists, for example, to know how to cite scientific sources of information, how to design a hypothesis and a consequent experiment to test it. So we understand these are not easy tasks or feats, but we do try to prepare our students to the best of their abilities. What ends up happening most times, as I'm saying, is the student just stays at this level of the task description, which is what needs to be done, right? Here we can outline the different parts of the lab report, the different sections, and how to construct them. What we encourage our students to do, and frankly, many of them have not engaged with yet, is to dig deeper, to go towards the end of the task description, where they can find the criteria that the test is going to be used in to assess the different levels of achievement. Most students, once again, they just stick to the task description and they miss out on this key piece of information. For example, this task here, the lab report we're looking at today, was analyzing 2 criteria, as every task can analyze up to the 4 criteria, but we usually dance around between 1 or 2 of them. For this task, it was criterion B, which is inquiring and designing, and the integrated sciences, and criterion C, which is processing and evaluating. As Mr. Van will get into in a little bit, we can find here a commonality, even though they're different criteria, and that they're both solely relying on command terms. These are indicators of levels of achievement in the student's work. For example, we can observe at the basic level of the criteria how we often find the command terms of state, right, collect, present. But if we dig deeper into the higher levels of achievement, stating develops into outlining, justifying, describing. Now we can really glance at seeing the difference between what needs to be done and how do we need to do it to show proficiency in that skill or knowledge. So what we're going to invite you guys to do is to take a look at the different samples that are presented of students' works. We've selected 2 random student samples for this task that you guys can once again see on the screen, which is a lab report. We're going to invite you guys to take a look at the first sections and the student sample that is marked until where you should assess. And after that, we'll come back together. We'll look at the way we assessed it at school and compare and contrast our different observations. Hopefully this is a fruitful endeavor and we do all walk out of here with a clear view on assessment, specifically in the MYP.
We're going to leave this summative task there on the screen. I'm having difficulties uploading the documents to the chat. But if you want to, so this is the student's work. I mean, Mr. Jesus is here. Hopefully he'll be able to help us upload. We need to, Mr. Jesus, share with our attendees in the chat
a couple documents.
A couple documents, yes. Maybe you can do it as a host of the meeting.
So while we wait, guys, I think we can start taking a look collaboratively at the task. The first section of the task was an introduction. As we may know, every scientific experiment must start with an introduction with a bit of context as to why, the rationale for the experiment. Why are we spending our time and energy in investigating this scientific phenomena? If we can take a closer look at this specific student's introduction, we can find that no longer the student states what the experiment is about, but why they chose this idea. So they're justifying, right? They're not just stating, they're justifying their scientific choice. And they're given descriptions or details as to why they made that choice. For example, this student was really interested in it to see if there was a change depending on the time that it was for the temperature, right? And then the student specified that it wanted to observe how much time it took the AC to get closer to that value of 20. So we can see really specific ideas in this interaction already, right? A lot of rationale, a lot of thinking going on in this the first sample. We move on to the second section of a lab report, which is usually somewhat in between a methods and a variable section. Here, the student needs to identify the 3 different types of variables that they use for their experiment. Throughout this unit, this is the first unit in the sciences and the MYP for these students, they've been introduced to the concept of variables, right? To the different types of variables, a dependent variable, which is what we measure, then dependent variable, which is usually what we experience that change upon, and then control variables, right? To isolate and observe the change. So the students then had to choose and design their own experiment around one of these environmental factors. Once again, the student chose temperature, and here we can find that that was in fact the dependent variable. The independent variable was time. The student was interested in observing the effect of time in these different temperature measurements. The student also correctly identified a few control variables, right? If we go back to our levels of achievement and the criteria, we can find that once again, stating just a single control variable will be minimum level of achievement, but this student goes on to identify multiple, right? Once again, it shows us that not only they're doing what they're asked, but they're thinking deep and making these scientific choices, and they're evidencing these choices with ideas, with facts, and with observations, which is what we want them to do as scientists. And we continue going down the report, we can find a hypothesis section. A hypothesis is like the scientific guess, in a sense, that a student needs to make before engaging in the experiment. And here we can find, once again, a lot of specificity within the student sample. Not only the hypothesis was very clear, it also specified the different types of measurement and different expected outcomes. However, it did run out a bit more. So it was quite long we want them to be a bit more concise. So we'll get into that when it comes to assessing the work. But we can find a lot of specificity, which once again might indicate that we're shooting for the higher levels of achievement in the criteria, right? The student is justifying and in detail describing the scientific choices, not just merely stating them. And we can continue to see this pattern when we go to the methods section. Here, the student once again details quite well all the steps taken in making this experiment, right? It is important that we note our work as scientists in case anyone wants to repeat our experiments to further prove the accuracy of these, right? So for that, we asked our students to really take a detail-oriented approach to a methods section, to detail down every different design choice that they made. And this student did so brilliantly, as we can observe. Then if we were to go on to the next section, then we'll get into criterion C, processing and evaluating. But for today's purposes, we'll just stick up until now, till the method section, which relates us to criterion B, which is inquiring and designing. So we can now all take a couple seconds and think, okay, maybe we show you again the criteria, and then you take a couple minutes or seconds to identify what levels of achievement you might give in criterion B so far for the student. So, yes. Perfect. So we're looking at criterion B right now. Please take a minute or two, think of the student samples we just looked at, and try to identify, if you can, any of these criteria levels of achievement you might want to identify for the student's work. All right, guys, I hope everyone had a couple minutes or some time to think through these different levels of achievement, or even just to comprehend their meaning. Now we're going to show you the actual feedback and assessment criteria grade that I gave the student for this work, and we can discuss it. It is up for discussion. There is no right or wrong answers here. We're always trying to improve our assessment, and that's what these meetings are also there for us to get some feedback. So we look at criterion B, and once again, inquiring and designing for the student. The level of achievement in terms of the numerical value was a 6 out of 8. And here's where most of the students stop, and most of the families stop as well. They just see the numerical value and they say, okay, that's enough. But we invite you really to take a closer look at the writing. We spent a lot of time as MYP staff in crafting these comments because we do believe that they highlight the areas for improvement for our students, and we do them criteria specific. That way it's really easy for the students to understand, okay, not only I need to improve in science, but what specifically in science do I need to get better at? Maybe it's just a criterion. So if we look at the feedback for the student in criterion B, it goes on as the following. For criterion B, you started off strong with your introduction by mentioning a few alternative experiments, ideas. So not only stating one, but a few of them, and also justifying your choices for your dependent variable, which was temperature. For further improvement, you could have added a bit more information from scientific sources about the effect on temperature on different learning environments, for example. Any sort of information relating to your dependent variable would have been a good way to enhance your introduction section. You did a marvelous job explaining your variables and your hypothesis, even though you did transmit your scientific guess. I think could work on making our hypothesis a bit shorter and more concise. So even though we tend to always focus on the positives, right? Start with the strong points in the student's work. We then highlight some areas for improvement that kind of justify our choice in that criterion grade. And if we were to go back to the levels of achievement, we would understand that the student, yes, is justifying and describing their scientific choices, but these need to be made a bit more clearly, right? More concisely, quality over quantity, which is also something that our students struggle a lot with assessment in the MYP. And I think, well, if I need to write a 2,000 word essay for Mr. E and then I write 3,000 words, then I might get an 8 or 8. We want to stress again, it is quality over quantity, and a quality that is based around criteria, levels of achievement. So we do invite you guys to take some time at home if you can, next time that a task comes up, and sit down with your students and ask them not only what do you need to do for this task, but how do you need to do it? Let's look at the criteria. What are the different command terms available for you to use and really showcase your knowledge in this task? So we do understand that our assessment might not be perfect, but we always try to assess our students fair and in equity. And hopefully this example gave you guys a closer look at that.
I'm very sorry because we wanted you to actually download the samples of assessment, the criteria, and do this a bit more active on your side as well, being able to see and mark. The chat didn't work to share the files with you, unfortunately, but what we can do is I don't like to send homework, but we will share with you the idea we had for this activity. We will send you as well through my SEK the documents to all of the families so that you can practice at home with your children and see, look, we have 2 samples of assessment. Let's assess together so that you all understand better the philosophy of assessment behind this. Very well. Let's keep on going. Any questions so far? You're going to leave them for the end. Sounds good. Very well. So as you see on ManageBack, you will be able to, when you access any task on ManageBack, and your children as well, they will be able to see the different criteria for assessment that are being used for that specific task, so they know how are they going to be assessed for that task. As Mr. Jorge mentioned during the sorry, the activity, what was meant to be an activity, in the IB is very important as well what we call the command terms. Command terms are marked in this slide in different colors. So if you see for criterion B, science, level of achievement 1, 2 would be stating a problem or question. If you see the level of achievement 3, 4, instead of stating, the word used is different, is outline a problem. In yellow, for the next level of achievement, describe. And finally, for the highest level of achievement, explain. But how do we read this? Well, as I mentioned, we use command terms, and you have them here. So if we go to the blue, the lowest level of achievement, which is stating, what does it mean to state something? If you read there, it says give a specific name, value, or other brief answer without explanation or calculation. Now, if we jump to a higher level of achievement, outlining would be give a brief account or summary. If we want to go even further, yellow, describe, is give a detailed account or picture of a situation, event, pattern, or process. So we're changing from giving a brief account to a detailed account. And if we explain, we would be giving a detailed account, including reasons and causes. So as you see, it develops as the level of achievement increases, and this is for every single criterion within the IB MYP subjects. Very well. This is the activity you just developed. We promise we're going to send it home so that you also can practice. Something also interesting, and I'm going to let Mr. Jorge speak about this, is the different levels of achievement per criterion, because we not only have one, we have one level of achievement, one specific set of criteria for MYP year 1, grade 6, another one for MYP year 3, grade 8, and another one for MYP year 5 or grade 10.
Yes, as Mr. Ivanis correctly pointed out, we do have these 3 different clusters of criteria. So for the first 2 years of the program, we'll probably be looking at criteria 1, cluster 1, and then when we actually reach MYP year 3, we'd like all of our students to have transitioned already towards MYP criterion 3, which is the next level of difficulty, as to say. And what does this mean? That often the criteria are taken to the next level, all of the different criteria. The stating is no longer the bare minimum. We're hoping that by these 2 years of the program, the students have developed the ability to go further than that minimum. So all of a sudden, not only are the stakes higher, but so are the expectations. But hopefully our students once again have gained that toolbox of skills and knowledge about the program and the different subjects, so that stating is no longer a practice, that we move towards designing, outlining, justifying, right? And here we would see that no longer these command terms are the most prominent part of the achievement descriptor, but we start to find a lot of content specific terms as well. And this makes sense as the complexity in terms of the subject material is increasing as the years go through by in the program. So once again, we observe a curve in the use of the command terms in terms of complexity, while also associating an increasing complexity of subject-specific content associated with these command terms, right? We hope that our students by the 3rd year of the program have been able to identify those links. And we're hoping to transition all of our students in grade 7 and 8 and that mixed group towards criteria 3 and then the second term of this academic year. So right now, in the first round of reports, we are assessing with criteria year 1, and we will transition all of our grade 7 and 8 students over criteria in grade 3. This is important to note because we might see a slight decrease when we do that switch, right? So parents at home, also be patient as our students are transitioning through these criteria levels. You might see that a student who has been performing at a high level in terms of a 6, 7, or 8 might all of a sudden go down to a 3 and a 4, or even a 2. And that's valuable, right? We invite you guys to think about criteria as a continuum. When we assess a criteria grade, we're not putting a definite point to the learning. We're just highlighting another path along the journey. So we want to continue to stress the idea that criteria, we should look at them as a continuum. And especially remind yourselves of this when we do switch onto criteria 3, and you might experience a decrease in your students' performance in terms of achievement levels, but that's more than expected, and we'll definitely work with them to accommodate that transition as smoothly as we can.
Thank you, Jorge. Do you have any questions so far? Because this is being a monologue more than a... Please feel free to turn on your microphone and let us know. To finalize, while you think of your questions for later, to finalize, we wanted to give you an example of how we, because in the end, soon enough, in a couple of weeks, you'll be receiving report cards for the MYP as well. And we would like to explain how you have to read and how teachers prepare the final marks. This is an example of what a teacher would see for a random student for the 4 criteria. So this teacher, as you see, has assessed with summative tasks several times criterion A. Just once, criterion B, twice C, and 3 times criterion D. Now, we never do an average. In the IB, as Mr. Jorge mentioned, we look at the continuum, we look at the progression, we look at the development of our students. So we look at the whole. A very good example here is criterion D, using language. This student has produced 3 pieces of work for this criterion. He or she got a 4 in the first task, and then 2 7s. So any IB teacher would see that for whatever reason, the first task this student produced was not up to the level. However, after the feedback given by the teacher, this student was able to consistently score a higher mark. So in this case, the final grade that the teacher would give for this criterion would be closer to a 7 than it is to a 4. So maybe the teacher would give even a 7 would be an option, or maybe as well a 6. So we have to look at it this way. We never average. For criterion C, for instance, you have a 3 and a 7 for this student. So the mark the student would be getting, it may be a 5 if the teacher believes this student is on a 5, but it could be also closer to a 6 because we've seen the student developing. Okay, this is important for you to understand. This is what the teacher would do. This is what you are going to see in the progress report cards soon in December. You're going to get, for each subject, you're going to get the 4 criteria assessed from 0 to 8. Okay. One of the things that you have to take in consideration is that as an IB school, we must assess each criterion twice a year, but there are some criteria that may not be assessed yet with a summative task. So for these first report cards, it is likely that you're going to find the 4 criteria assessed with summative tasks, but if you see in one of the criteria not applicable NA and an incomplete mark in the end, don't be scared. It's completely normal. Maybe for that subject, we have subjects as English or maths in which students, they have 4 classes per week, but there are some other in which students have only 1 or 2 classes per week, such as design or music. So for those subjects, you may not find all 4 criteria assessed with a summative mark. So there you will see an incomplete final mark. Don't worry, you will have a complete final mark, 100% sure, for the second term report cards. It is important as well that you understand that we've been talking about 4 criteria per subject and a mark from 0 to 8, but then at the end, these 4 criteria, the marks are added and you have boundary guidelines for a final mark. The final mark you'll get, your children will get, is from 1 to 7, and this aligns with the diploma program marks that students will face soon enough when they grow and they move to the diploma program, and we open as well the diploma program at school. So you will see that depending on the addition of these 4 criteria, if the addition of all 4, hello? Hello, does someone has a question? We are about to finish and open the Q&A. Just wanted to mention that this is how we calculate the final mark with the addition of all 4 criteria. And we just wanted to give you some highlights about how can you help your children at home, how can you approach assessment at home with them, and then we will open for Q&As.
Yes, very briefly, we wanted to highlight 3 different steps you can take at home towards having constructive conversations with your students around assessment. The first one will be to face the feedback. It'd be great if families can sit down with students and look at assessment collaboratively, not just the numerical value once again, but also the descriptors, and look at the levels of achievement as well as the teacher's comments. The second step in this journey will be to set realistic growth goals. So after reviewing that feedback, encourage the learner to either draft a step-by-step plan for improvement, to organize their goals in some sort of hierarchy, to understand and to have a factual way to improve based on that feedback giving. And then the third step and final step along this journey would be to share the success. Once those goals are achieved or work towards, celebrate those small victories along the journey, right? These matter as well, and they tend to propel our students to the next levels of achievement in this criteria. And always please refer to ManageBack as our main source of communication when it comes to assessment. Thank you.
Very well. So we're going to open now. Thank you very much for being so patient. Again, our intention was to have a more interactive session with the task. We will send it, but I am going to stop sharing just in case you want to open your microphones and ask any question you may have for Mr. Jorge and myself. If you feel shy about asking, you can also write on the chat. I am going to stop the recording now, I believe, while I give you some time to think.